The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Phoenix Digital's headquarters in downtown Seattle, each drop tracing silver lines down the glass like tears on a giant's face. I adjusted my blazer and checked my watch, 4:47 p.m. on a Friday that felt heavier than most. After 18 years of walking these polished concrete floors, I knew every echo, every shadow cast by the industrial lighting fixtures suspended from the exposed steel beams above. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Cindy Collins, and I was Phoenix Digital's Chief Technology Officer, the woman who built their entire cloud infrastructure from the ground up when we were still operating out of a cramped office above a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. Now, we occupy 3 floors of this gleaming tower in South Lake Union, and our servers powered apps used by over 50 million people worldwide. I headed toward the executive conference room for what I thought was our routine Friday strategy meeting. The acquisition talks with Meridian Corp had been intense for the past 6 months, and we were finally approaching the finish line. A $200 million deal that would transform Phoenix Digital from a regional player into a national powerhouse. I had mixed feelings about selling the company I'd helped create, but the offer was too good to refuse. As I approached the frosted glass doors, I noticed something unusual. The blinds were drawn, something that never happened during our regular meetings. Jonathan Steele, our CEO, insisted on transparency in everything we did. Through the narrow gaps in the blinds, I could see silhouettes moving inside. More people than usual for our small leadership team. I knocked twice and entered without waiting for a response. The room fell silent as 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Jonathan sat at the head of the polished walnut table, his usually perfect silver hair slightly disheveled. To his right sat Margaret Chen, our CFO, her laptop closed and her hands folded in a way that screamed discomfort. 3 people I didn't recognize occupied the chairs along the far wall, expensive suits, leather briefcases, and the predatory stillness of corporate lawyers. Cindy, Jonathan's voice had an edge I'd never heard before, brittle like ice about to crack. Please, have a seat. I remained standing, my instincts prickled by the formal tone and the presence of strangers. What's going on, John? Who are these people? One of the lawyers, a woman with steel gray hair and calculating eyes, opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Miss Collins, I'm Victoria Hayes from Blackstone Legal. We represent Meridian Corp. We're here to discuss the transition process. Transition process? I looked around the room, noting how everyone avoided my gaze except for Jonathan, who stared at me with something that might have been regret. The merger isn't finalized yet. We're still in due diligence. Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Cindy, there have been some developments. Jonathan cleared his throat and straightened his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed during board presentations. Meridian has accelerated their timeline. They want to close next Friday, and they've requested some immediate changes to our leadership structure. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. 18 years in tech had taught me never to show weakness in a room full of sharks. What kind of changes? Victoria Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Miss Collins, Meridian already has a robust technology division led by their own CTO. They feel that maintaining dual leadership in that area would create redundancy. Redundancy, I repeated the word slowly, letting its implications settle. You're firing me. We prefer to call it a strategic transition, Jonathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Meridian is offering a generous severance package, 6 months salary, full benefits, and a positive reference letter. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the conference room walls. 6 months? For 18 years of my life? For building every system that makes this company worth $200 million? The second lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, slid a document across the table. The separation agreement includes a comprehensive non-compete clause and confidentiality provisions. Sign here, and you can clean out your office this evening. I stared at the papers without touching them, my mind racing through 18 years of memories. Late nights debugging code while Jonathan slept on the office couch. Weekend hackathons where we survived on pizza and energy drinks. The day we landed our first major client and celebrated with champagne and plastic cups because we couldn't afford real glasses. You're doing this now? On a Friday evening? With lawyers I've never met? Margaret finally found the courage to look at me. Cindy, please understand, this isn't personal. Meridian made it clear that your transition was a non-negotiable part of the deal.
My transition. I picked up the document and flipped through its pages, each one filled with legal jargon designed to erase me from the company I'd built. And if I don't sign? Victoria Hayes leaned forward. Then Meridian withdraws their offer, and everyone in this room loses out on a life-changing opportunity. Is that what you want, Miss Collins? To be the person who destroyed your colleagues' futures out of spite? The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't started. I looked around the table at people I'd considered friends, allies, family. Not one of them met my eyes. They'd already made their choice, and I was the sacrifice. I set the document back on the table without signing it. I need time to think. Time is something we don't have, the thin lawyer interjected. Meridian wants confirmation of your departure by end of business today, or they reconsider the entire acquisition. Then let them reconsider. I turned toward the door, my reflection multiplying in the glass walls that surrounded us. I'll give you my answer Monday morning.
As I drove through the rain-soaked streets toward my apartment in Belltown, I thought about the document I'd left unsigned on the conference room table. Victoria Hayes and her team probably assumed I was just another employee who could be bought with the right severance package. They had no idea what I'd been quietly building for the past 3 years, or why I'd never signed the updated equity agreements Jonathan kept pushing in front of me. Some secrets were worth keeping, even from the people you trusted most. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical for Seattle in October. I sat in my apartment's small home office, surrounded by 3 monitors, and the gentle hum of my personal server rack, a miniature version of the data center I'd designed for Phoenix Digital. The space smelled of fresh coffee and the ozone scent of electronics, familiar and comforting. David had stayed late the night before, helping me work through the emotional aftermath of yesterday's ambush. As a corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions, he understood the game better than most. But even he had been shocked by the timing and methods Jonathan had employed. "They're rushing this for a reason," he'd said over our second bottle of wine. "Clean deals don't require lawyer ambushes on Friday evenings." Now, in the harsh light of morning, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I pulled out a locked filing cabinet from beneath my desk and entered the combination I'd memorized but never written down. Inside lay 18 years of documentation, every contract, every agreement, every piece of paper I'd signed since Phoenix Digital's incorporation. Most employees never read the fine print, trusting their employers to handle the legal complexities. But growing up with a lawyer for a brother had taught me to scrutinize every clause, every subsection, every seemingly innocent paragraph buried in dense legal prose. I found what I was looking for in a folder labeled Equity Agreements 2019-2021. 3 years ago, Jonathan had pushed hard for all senior executives to sign updated stock option agreements, claiming they simplified the equity structure and provided better tax advantages. Most of my colleagues had signed immediately, trusting Jonathan's assurances. But I remembered something bothering me about the language, a strange clause buried in Section 47C that seemed oddly specific. I'd asked David to review it, and his response had been immediate. "Don't sign this, not yet." Now, I spread the documents across my desk and read the clause that saved my career. In the event of a proposed merger, acquisition, or sale of substantially all company assets valued at $100 million or more, any founding member holding original equity grants predating January 1st, 2020 retains unilateral veto power over said transaction provided such member remains in good standing with the company and has not voluntarily resigned or been terminated for cause. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding as the implications became clear. Phoenix Digital had been founded in 2006, making me one of only 3 people who qualified as founding members with original equity grants. The other 2 were Jonathan and Margaret, and they'd both signed the updated agreements that waived this protection. I was the only person left with veto power over the Meridian acquisition. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Collins, this is Victoria Hayes. Mr. Steele would like to schedule a meeting Monday morning to discuss your departure. Please confirm your availability. I stared at the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. They thought they held all the cards, that firing me was just a formality before closing their $200 million deal. They had no idea they just handed me the nuclear option. But I needed to be smart about this. Rushing in with threats and demands would only put them on the defensive. If Jonathan had taught me anything over 18 years, it was the value of patience and strategic thinking. I spent the rest of Saturday researching Meridian Corp, digging deeper than the glossy press releases and annual reports I'd reviewed during our initial negotiations. What I found painted a troubling picture. 3 acquisitions in the past 5 years, each followed by massive layoffs and the systematic dismantling of the acquired company's original culture and technology. Their pattern was clear. Buy promising companies, strip out the valuable intellectual property, integrate it into their existing platforms, and eliminate the redundant staff. Phoenix Digital wasn't being acquired, it was being consumed. Sunday evening, I called Jonathan's personal cell phone. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice wary. Cindy, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. We need to talk, John, just the 2 of us.
I think it would be better if we kept this professional. Victoria Hayes This isn't about the lawyers or the severance package, I interrupted. This is about something you should have checked before you decided to throw me under the bus. A long pause. What do you mean? Monday morning. Your office, 9 a.m. sharp. I ended the call before he could respond. I spent Sunday evening preparing for a conversation that would either save my career or destroy the company I'd helped build. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same attention to detail that had made me valuable as the CTO was now the weapon I'd use to protect myself from corporate betrayal. As I reviewed the equity documents one last time, I thought about the choice Jonathan had forced upon me. For 18 years, I'd been the loyal soldier, putting the company's interests ahead of my own. I'd worked weekends, missed vacations, and sacrificed relationships for the greater good of Phoenix Digital. Now, they'd shown me exactly how much that loyalty was worth: 6 months severance and an escort to the door. But they'd forgotten the most important rule of technology: always check your permissions before trying to delete critical files. Monday morning came with unexpected sunshine, the kind of clear October day that made Seattle feel like the promised land. Dressed carefully, my best navy suit, the one I wore to board presentations and investor meetings. If this was going to be a war, I wanted to look like someone worth negotiating with. Phoenix Digital's lobby buzzed with its usual Monday energy, but I noticed something different in the way people looked at me. Word had spread about Friday's meeting, and speculation ran rampant through the company's internal chat channels. Some employees nodded respectfully, others avoided eye contact. The smart ones probably sensed that bigger changes were coming. I took the elevator to the 15th floor, where Jonathan's corner office overlooked Elliott Bay. His assistant, Maria, looked up nervously as I approached. Miss Collins, he's expecting you. Should I? I'll announce myself. I knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Jonathan sat behind his glass desk, reading something on his laptop screen. He looked older than I remembered, stress lines etched deeper around his eyes. The weekend hadn't been kind to him. Cindy, please sit down. I remained standing, positioning myself in front of the windows so the morning light would backlight my silhouette. A small psychological advantage, but I'd take any edge I could get. Before we start, he said, I want you to know this wasn't personal. Meridian made it clear. Section 47C.
The color drained from his face. What? Equity Agreement, Revision 2019, Section 47C, Subsection 3. The clause you hoped I'd forgotten about. You tried to get me to sign it away 3 years ago, remember? Along with everyone else. Jonathan's hands froze above his keyboard. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out a copy of my original equity agreement and placed it on his desk. Founding member veto power over mergers valued above $100 million. You tried to get me to sign it away 3 years ago, remember? Along with everyone else? He stared at the document as if it were a live grenade. Cindy, let's be reasonable here. Reasonable? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to just above a whisper. You ambushed me with lawyers on a Friday evening, tried to force me out with 6 months severance, and now you want to talk about being reasonable? The board has already approved the merger. The paperwork is filed. Meridian has committed $200 million, and I can kill it with a single phone call. I straightened up, letting that reality settle between us. One call to my attorney, one formal objection filed with the state, and your deal disappears, along with Meridian's confidence in your ability to manage your own company. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, studying my face as if seeing me for the first time. What do you want? The question I'd been waiting for, the moment when 18 years of loyalty and expertise translated into leverage. First, I want to know why. Why throw away 18 years? Why side with strangers who see Phoenix Digital as nothing more than intellectual property to be harvested? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the bay where ferries moved like white toys across the dark water. Margaret ran the numbers. After the merger, keeping duplicate CTOs would cost Meridian an extra $2 million annually in salary and benefits. They said it was you or the deal. So you chose the deal.
I chose the company. $200 million, Cindy. Enough to secure everyone's future, to fund the next phase of growth, to eliminate the person who built the technology they're buying. I shook my head. You really think they'll honor their promises about growth and expansion? Have you looked at their track record? His silence told me he hadn't. Or worse, that he had and didn't care. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to call Victoria Hayes and tell her there's been a complication with the equity structure. You're going to buy me time to review Meridian's real intentions for our employees, our technology, and our culture. And then we're going to renegotiate this deal from a position of strength instead of desperation. Cindy, I can't just... Yes, you can. Because the alternative is watching your $200 million deal collapse in real time while you explain to the board why you didn't check the paperwork before trying to fire a founding member. I walked to the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. Oh, and John, next time you want to betray someone who's devoted their life to your company, make sure they can't destroy everything you've worked for with a single signature. The elevator ride back to my floor felt different this time. Instead of descending away from betrayal, I was rising toward redemption. My phone buzzed with a text from David. How did it go? I typed back. Phase 2 complete. Now the real work begins. Because I hadn't just saved my job, I'd positioned myself to save the entire company from a predatory acquisition that would have destroyed everything we'd built. The question was whether Jonathan would be smart enough to recognize the gift I was offering or stubborn enough to fight a war he couldn't win. Either way, I was ready for whatever came next. Tuesday morning brought chaos disguised as corporate efficiency. I arrived at Phoenix Digital to find the building buzzing with nervous energy. Hushed conversations in hallways, worried glances during elevator rides, and the unmistakable tension that accompanies uncertainty about the future. Word had leaked about my meeting with Jonathan,
though the details remained murky. All anyone knew for certain was that the Meridian deal had suddenly hit an unexpected snag, and the woman everyone thought was getting fired was still very much employed. I made my way to the conference room where Jonathan had assembled our senior leadership team for an emergency meeting. As I entered, 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed panic. Margaret Shen looked like she hadn't slept in days. The 3 Meridian lawyers from Friday were notably absent. "Thank you all for coming," Jonathan began, his voice carefully neutral. "We need to discuss some recent developments regarding the Meridian acquisition." I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, directly across from Jonathan. The power dynamic had shifted since Friday, and everyone in the room could feel it. "As some of you may have heard," Jonathan continued, "there have been some complications with the equity structure that require immediate attention." Marcus Webb, our head of sales, leaned forward. "What kind of complications? Meridian's lawyers seemed pretty confident everything was in order." Jonathan's eyes flicked to me, then back to Marcus. "It turns out there are certain contractual provisions that we overlooked during the initial due diligence process." "Overlooked?" Sarah Kim, our VP of Product Development, raised her eyebrow. "What does that mean exactly?" This was my moment. I'd spent Monday evening and all of Tuesday morning preparing for this conversation, researching every aspect of Meridian's acquisition history, and building a case that would resonate with everyone in this room. "It means," I said, my voice cutting through the confusion, "that someone has veto power over this deal, and management forgot to check who that someone might be." The room went silent. Margaret's face had gone pale. "Veto power?" Marcus echoed. "How is that possible?" I opened the folder I'd brought and distributed copies of the relevant equity agreements to everyone at the table. Founding members with original grants retain unilateral veto power over major transactions. It was built into our incorporation documents as a protection against hostile takeovers. Sarah scanned her copy quickly, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. "And you're the only founding member who didn't sign the updated agreements that waived this protection?" "Correct. And when it comes to our account, we're pretty sure our $200 million deal is exactly what it needs."
The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "Why would you want to kill a $200 million acquisition? That's generational wealth for all of us." "Is it?" I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the room's presentation screen. "Let me show you what I found when I dug deeper into Meridian's PAC record." The first slide showed a timeline of Meridian's acquisitions over the past 5 years. TechFlow Solutions, acquired in 2019 for $150 million. 16 months later, 70% staff reduction, core technology integrated into Meridian's existing platforms, original company dissolved. The second slide was even more damning. DataBridge Analytics, acquired in 2020 for $89 million. 2 years later, complete shutdown of original operations, all intellectual property absorbed, 85% of employees laid off or reassigned to lower-level positions. I watched their faces as the pattern became clear. InnovateSoft, CloudSync Technologies, Digital First Media, every single company Meridian has acquired has been systematically dismantled within 2 years. They don't buy companies to grow them. They buy them to harvest their technology and eliminate competition. Margaret finally found her voice. "But they promised. They promised what they always promise. Growth opportunities, expanded markets, career advancement for key personnel. The same script they've used 5 times before with the same results." Sarah leaned back in her chair, the implications sinking in. "So, if we go through with this deal, Phoenix Digital ceases to exist within 18 months. Our technology gets absorbed into Meridian's cloud platform. Most of our employees get terminated during restructuring. The few who remain become middle managers in a company that sees them as temporary placeholders." The room erupted in discussion as everyone began talking at once. Marcus argued about the financial security the deal provided. Sarah worried about our employees' futures. Margaret tried to defend her financial analysis while simultaneously questioning its assumptions. Through it all, Jonathan remained silent, staring at the presentation screen as if seeing Meridian's true intentions for the first time. I waited for the conversation to die down before dropping my final bombshell. There's something else you should know. I've been in contact with 2 other companies interested in acquiring Phoenix Digital, companies with track records of growing their acquisitions rather than dismantling them. This got Jonathan's attention immediately. What companies? Aurora Systems offered $180 million last month. I told them we weren't interested because we were committed to Meridian, but they're still interested. I advanced to the next slide. Their last 3 acquisitions have all seen revenue growth of 40 to 60% within 2 years of closing. And the second company? Margaret asked, though she looked like she was afraid to hear the answer. Cascade Technologies. They specialize in scaling cloud infrastructure companies like ours. Their offer was $220 million, with performance bonuses that could push it to $280 million if we hit certain growth targets. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stared at me as if I'd just revealed I was secretly running a parallel universe. Marcus was the first to speak. Why didn't you mention these offers before? Because until Friday evening, I trusted Jonathan and Margaret to negotiate the best deal for our company. I thought my job was to focus on technology, not mergers and acquisitions. I looked directly at Jonathan. That trust was misplaced. Jonathan's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, then looked up with grim resignation. Victoria Hayes. She wants to know when we'll have confirmation of Cindy's departure so they can proceed with closing. Tell her we need more time. Tell her there are equity complications that require legal review. Don't mention the veto power yet. Let them sweat a little while we explore our other options. Cindy, Margaret interjected, even if these other offers are real, we can't just walk away from Meridian. They've invested months of due diligence, they've committed resources, they've committed to destroying everything we've built. The only question is whether we're going to let them. Sarah cleared her throat. What exactly are you proposing? I'd been waiting for this question, the moment when I could pivot from defense to offense. I'm proposing we take control of our own destiny instead of letting others decide our fate. Here's what we're going to do. I advanced to my final slide, which outlined a 3-phase plan I developed over the weekend. Phase 1, we inform Meridian that due to unexpected equity complications, we need 30 days to resolve all outstanding issues before proceeding. This gives us time to properly evaluate our alternatives.
Phase 2, we open formal negotiations with Aurora Systems and Cascade Technologies. Full due diligence, complete transparency about our options. Let them compete for the privilege of acquiring Phoenix Digital. Phase 3, we choose the best offer for our employees, our technology, and our future, not just the first offer that happened to land on our desk. Marcus nodded slowly. And if Meridian threatens to withdraw their offer? Let them. I closed my laptop and looked around the table. Any company that demands we fire key personnel as a condition of acquisition isn't a company we want to partner with. Any company that operates under ultimatums and artificial deadlines isn't interested in our long-term success. The meeting broke up 20 minutes later with a vote to implement my plan. It wasn't unanimous. Margaret abstained, clearly conflicted about abandoning months of work on the Meridian deal. But 5 out of 7 senior leaders agreed that we needed to explore our options before committing to a transaction that could destroy everything we'd built. Jonathan lingered after everyone else had left, staring out the conference room windows at the Seattle skyline. You know, he said quietly, 3 days ago, I thought I was making the smart play. Securing everyone's financial future, positioning the company for rapid growth, eliminating potential conflict between leadership teams. And now? Now I realized I almost sold our souls to the highest bidder without bothering to read the fine print. How long have you known about Aurora and Cascade? Aurora reached out 6 weeks ago. Cascade called last month. I forwarded their initial inquiries to you and Margaret,
but you both said you weren't interested in exploring alternatives to Meridian. Jonathan winced. We were so focused on closing the deal in front of us, we never considered whether it was the right deal. It's not too late to fix this, but it requires admitting that we made mistakes and being willing to start over with better information. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Meridian's lawyers called my office. They're getting nervous. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I showed him the message. They're starting to realize they don't have as much control as they thought. What happens if they walk away entirely? Then we negotiate with companies that actually want to partner with us, instead of companies that want to consume us. I stood to leave, then paused at the door. John, you've built something amazing here. Don't let fear convince you to sell it to people who don't understand its value. The next morning brought the call I'd been expecting. Victoria Hayes, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Miss Collins, we need to resolve this equity issue immediately. Meridian has deadlines to meet, and these delays are becoming problematic. I understand your concerns, I replied, my tone professionally neutral. Unfortunately, legal complications can't be rushed. My attorney estimates we'll need at least 3 weeks to resolve all outstanding issues. 3 weeks is unacceptable. Meridian's board meets next Friday, and they expect confirmation that all personnel transitions have been completed. Then perhaps Meridian should have done more thorough due diligence before making demands about personnel transitions. I let that sink in before continuing. Ms. Hayes, I'm sure you'll understand that Phoenix Digital needs to protect its legal interests just as Meridian protects theirs. The call ended with promises to discuss this internally and get back to me with a revised timeline. I wasn't holding breath. Friday afternoon brought vindication in the form of a conference call that changed everything. Aurora Systems, Cascade Technologies, and Phoenix Digital's leadership team gathered virtually to discuss the future of our company. The contrast with Meridian's approach was immediate and stark. Where Meridian had demanded personnel changes as a precondition, Aurora asked detailed questions about our team's experience and expertise. Where Meridian had rushed toward artificial deadlines, Cascade proposed a measured timeline that respected everyone's need for thorough evaluation. Most importantly, both companies viewed our technology team as an asset to be grown rather than redundancy to be eliminated. By the end of the call, we had 2 competing offers that exceeded Meridian's proposal in both financial terms and strategic vision. Aurora's final offer, $195 million plus equity in the combined company. Cascade's proposal, $235 million plus performance bonuses tied to specific growth milestones.
But the real victory wasn't financial. It was cultural. Both companies committed to maintaining Phoenix Digital as a distinct division, preserving our team structure and investing in the technology we'd spent 18 years perfecting. Monday morning brought the final chapter of our Meridian saga. Victoria Hayes called Jonathan directly, her voice noticeably less confident than it had been the previous week. Mr. Steele, Meridian's board has authorized me to discuss some modifications to our original agreement. We understand there have been some concerns about the transition timeline, and we're prepared to be more flexible. Jonathan, to his credit, kept his response brief and professional. I appreciate Meridian's willingness to discuss modifications. Unfortunately, Phoenix Digital has decided to pursue other strategic alternatives that better align with our long-term vision. The silence on the other end lasted nearly 10 seconds. When Victoria finally spoke, her carefully maintained professionalism cracked slightly. Other alternatives? Mr. Steele, you can't be serious. We have a signed letter of intent, months of due diligence, board approval, all contingent on resolving the equity complications we discussed. Since those complications appear to be more complex than initially anticipated, we've decided it's in everyone's best interest to explore different options. I listened to the call from my office, feeling a satisfaction deeper than simple revenge. This wasn't about getting back at people who had betrayed me. This was about saving a company and all the people who depended on it from predators disguised as partners.
The following week, Phoenix Digital announced its acquisition by Cascade Technologies for $235 million, with performance bonuses that could reach $300 million over 3 years. The press release highlighted the strategic vision both companies shared, growing innovative technology through partnership rather than consolidation. My role in the deal remained largely behind the scenes, though industry observers noted the unusual speed with which Phoenix Digital had pivoted from one suitor to another. A few tech journalists speculated about internal power struggles and last-minute negotiations, but none of them discovered the real story of equity clauses and veto power. 6 months later, I sat in the same corner office where Jonathan tried to fire me, now serving as CTO of Phoenix Digital's expanded cloud division. Our team had grown by 40%, our technology served over 80 million users, and our revenue had exceeded all projections. Margaret Chen, who had initially resisted the change in direction, became one of our most effective advocates for the Cascade partnership. Marcus Webb closed 3 major enterprise deals in the first quarter alone, energized by the expanded market opportunities. Sarah Kim launched 2 new product lines that leveraged Cascade's distribution network. Even Jonathan seemed younger, more energetic, freed from the stress of managing a deal that would have destroyed everything he'd worked to build. But the real validation came from our employees. The same people who had watched nervously as lawyers invaded our conference room now worked with renewed purpose, knowing their company valued them as humans rather than treating them as replaceable resources. On a rainy Thursday evening, 6 months after the acquisition closed, I stood in the same conference room where Meridian's lawyers had tried to erase me from Phoenix Digital's future. This time I was alone, looking out at Elliott Bay as ferries traced white lines across the dark water. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Saw the quarterly numbers. Cascade stock up 12% since the Phoenix acquisition. Told you those equity clauses were worth keeping. I smiled, remembering the moment when I'd realized that 18 years of loyalty and expertise hadn't been wasted. They'd been investments in leverage I didn't know I'd possessed. They tried to fire me during a merger not knowing I had veto power over their $200 million deal. They'd assumed I was just another employee who could be discarded when convenient. They've forgotten that the people who build something from nothing rarely give it up without a fight. And sometimes, if you're patient and strategic and just a little bit lucky, the fight ends with you standing in the corner office watching the sunset over the company you helped save while your former adversaries explain to their board why their sure thing disappeared overnight. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't destruction. It was a transformation. It was taking the betrayal meant to end your career and using it as leverage to build something better. It was proving that loyalty, when properly weaponized, could move mountains and topple empires, even if they never saw it coming. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.